Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 137. Unreadable. Part 1. Nirvana was astonished by his mental attack bouncing off the fourth wall, and then he was hit by the white pure star energy. What the hell is this? I didn't do anything. It is the power of the story. What? I didn't believe in the doctrines of the Salvation Church, but there was one thing I agreed with. You said that strength and weakness is determined by the story. A high health warrior would just be food to a magician if they didn't have any magic defense skills. Strength and weaknesses were determined by the history of the characters. It is your fault that you didn't get any close combat skills in this life. All because you wanted to aim at Yu Jonghyuk's weakness. I never thought things would be resolved this way. Something influenced Nirvana's growth path, and he became the counter for Yu Jonghyuk. However, since Nirvana became Yu Jonghyuk's counter, he could never win against me. Nirvana's eyes shook as he read something in my tone. He stared at me quietly and said, "I know your name. Kim Dokja. We are talking about names? Okay, Nirvana Mobius. Do you want to have a heart-to-heart talk?" The light of the mandala turned off. A reincarnator wasn't a reincarnator for nothing. As if a switch was turned on, the agitated Nirvana disappeared, and the Nirvana who regained his composure was in front of me. Some nebulae warned me to be careful of you. Of course, I didn't know what to expect. Some nebulae. I was certainly drawing attention. Nirvana asked me, "How did you get such a strong mental barrier?" The only person who hasn't been infected with my thoughts until now was Anna Croft. I smiled bitterly at the familiar name. That woman had already touched the reincarnator. It wasn't strange. Anna Croft would have already started contacting the strongest players in the world. In order to save the world, that woman would even sell souls to the devil. Nirvana read something in my face and said, "You know the prophet. What the hell are you? Are you a regressor? Or the constellation demon-like judge of fire is interested in the story. The constellation's secretive plotter is quietly contemplating the situation. The information filtering should have gradually started being removed. Information about regressors and reincarnators would start to enter the ears of the constellations. I'm sure those of the great nebulae should already know about it." Nirvana looked at me and kept talking. "This is an interesting rebirth. I have lived for over 100 years, yet I am curious about you. You talk too much. It will be hard for you to get Yu Jonghyuk in the future. Kuhahat. I will accept you as a follower. A constellation who recites the Buddhist scriptures is wondering about you." It was a proposal I would have readily accepted earlier. However, I respectfully decline. Among those who are supporting me, there is one who hates your sponsor. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband reveals hostility to Nirvana Mobius's sponsor. Nirvana's mouth slightly opened. The Monkey King? Why is he chasing you? I don't know. I have become even more curious. Come under me along with Yu Jonghyuk. I don't want to. Aren't you curious about the secrets of this world? I can help you survive even after the end of this world. It has nothing to do with the failure of the scenarios. The words were persuasive. If I wasn't a reader, then I might have accepted it. I'll allow you to become one with me. Behind Nirvana's back, the mandala started to shine again. Hundreds of faces appeared on the slowly rotating mandala. The pained faces screamed. All of them were one with Nirvana. I exclaimed, "Shut up, you pervert. If you don't agree, then I'll have to force you." Nirvana's face was still relaxed, despite the unfavorable situation. In any case, the opponent was a reincarnator. He had lived countless lives, and had a much better combat sense than me. As time passed, my movements would start to be read by him and I would fall into a disadvantage. If so, the answer was to win the fight before that happened. A white energy swirled around the mandala. I didn't hesitate and rushed towards the mandala. The exclusive skill Miniaturization LV1 is activated. The effect of miniaturization will decrease the size of your body. My body became very small and the blow from the mandala missed. Nirvana laughed. What is this petty trick? Was it really a petty trick? Due to the effects of miniaturization, all your equipment will be transformed to fit your size. The skill level is low and the duration is shortened. The duration of miniaturization is 2 minutes. This was why I chose miniaturization over all the other good skills. It was because only miniaturization could make me the most powerful person I knew. I will choose the 5th bookmark, Kyrios Rodgrain. Your current body configuration is similar to the physical makeup of the character. The level of the character is too high to fully reproduce the skill level. The level of the skill being activated is forcibly adjusted. The white lightning energy swelled and nestled in my heart. It was the power to break the sky and cause thunder. Beyond the mighty lightning, I could see Nirvana's pale face. I wondered, do you still see this as a petty trick? No matter how strong Nirvana was, he couldn't surpass Kyrios's power at this moment. The exclusive skill Electrification LV10 is activated. Intense lightning appeared all over my body and clouds of lightning started to gather at my fists. If I couldn't take advantage of the reincarnator, then it was better to get rid of him here. I stretched out my fist towards Nirvana. Pray to be born human again. The lightning storm exploded towards Nirvana's side. Nirvana screamed terribly, and I heard the incarnations shouting. The level of miniaturization was low, so there wasn't as much power compared to when I dealt with Orochi, but it was still tremendous damage. A cloud of dust appeared and Nirvana was blown away with a large hole in his side. He was alive? How could that be? Eek! Blood poured from his mouth. It seemed to be a serious blow, but I wasn't satisfied. It was strange. He couldn't survive this attack, even if he was a reincarnator. Then I could see lotus petals growing on his body. I thought I knew what was going on. I thought this stigma wasn't possible, because of the probability. This bastard, don't tell me? Using my memories in a mere place like this. A grim voice was heard. I looked at the sparks around the petals and knew how he had survived. Story payment. He borrowed the power of his sponsor in exchange for his story. I will see you again. His body was covered in a large lotus leaf. I rushed towards him. My fist hit his chest, but Nirvana was laughing with a distorted face. You will pay for going against the present. It will be in the most terrible manner. Starting from the center of the chest that I hit, his body started turning into lotus leaves. I stretched out my hand and tried to grab onto the left arm of the disappearing person. Just wait. The next moment, Nirvana disappeared, leaving only his torn-off left arm and flying lotus leaves. The character, Nirvana Mobius, has used the stigma, No Ownership LV7. No ownership. It was a stigma where he abandoned some of his memories in exchange for escaping from danger. He paid using the memories of his reincarnations and escaped me. Leader. Leader Nim. Where did you go? The Salvation members were collapsing. Some were already running away. Others saw their leader being defeated by me, and the mental shock was huge. I sighed as I watched the Salvation members retreating. Smoke emerged from my body and miniaturization and bookmark were released at the same time. My overworked muscles were crying out in pain. I didn't manage to kill Nirvana, but there were some harvests. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband can't hide his joy at your victory. 10,000 coins have been sponsored. The incarnations who saw my victory looked at each other incredulously. The Salvation leader lost. Who is that incarnation? Wait a minute, that face, that. Someone pointing me and shouted, the ugliest king. I ignored them and found Yu Jonghyuk. Yu Jonghyuk was released from his paralysis and could be seen stumbling in the distance. This sunfish bastard, he didn't help when it was important. Hey, are you okay? Yu Jonghyuk held his head like he had a headache and asked, the reincarnator? He fled. Pathetic. Did you miss him? Do you have the right to say something like that? Yu Jong-hyuk's expression was serious. We have to quickly chase him. His purpose isn't to clear the scenario. I know that. If you know, then how could you let him leave? If you don't catch the reincarnator before the tense scenario ends, Sol will. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire belatedly regained her spirit. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire wants to explain why she came here. At Uriel's words, Yu Jong-hyuk and I looked up at the air simultaneously. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire needs your help. It was difficult to grasp the exact context due to the limitations of the indirect messages, but it wasn't difficult to guess what happened. Uriel was Yong Hee-won's sponsor. Uriel, who was supposed to be with Yong Hee-won, came all the way here and contact with Yong Hee-won was broken. This meant Min Jae-won SSI. Do you know where Yong Hee-won SSI is? However, Min Jae-won was still unconscious. This wouldn't work. Yu Jong-hyuk, defend me. What? I immediately closed my eyes and focused. I had become quite familiar with it after all the practice while sleeping. There was the feeling of my body sinking to the ground and darkness was everywhere. I felt a shallow sleep and immediately used Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. I needed to find a voice. I was looking for a voice. However, the voice was missing. I became increasingly uneasy. I told them to think about me when something happened. Was there a problem? Doc SSI. For the first time, someone called me. My vision distorted and third person's viewpoint was triggered. I groaned at what I saw on the screen. Warwick. The entire screen filled with white flames. It was the stigma of judgment that burned everything in the world. I didn't have to ask. This was definitely Yong Hee-won's hell flames ignition. It was fortunate. Yong Hee-won was still alive. By the way, it was strange. This wasn't Yong Hee-won's viewpoint? After a while, I saw the lotus pattern shin on Yong Hee-won's forehead within the flames. Damn, Nirvana already got to her. Well, Yu Jong-hyuk was hit by it. It would be weird if Yong Hee-won wasn't affected. However, a question still remained. Who called me? Yong Hee-won SSI? It was an unsophisticated soldier's voice. It was Lee Hyun-sung. Cuckoo cuckoo. There was a loud sound and the screen vibrated. The surrounding incarnations were blown away. Everywhere touched by the flames started burning. It was a location where I couldn't help immediately. In any case, there would definitely be consequences. Yong Hee-won was affected by thought infection and wouldn't hesitate. The innocent Lee Hyun-sung was helplessly exposed in front of her blade. Damn, what should I do? Cough. Suddenly, the darkness burst and the screen was broken. I opened my eyes with a strong sense of nausea and saw Yu Jong-hyuk's angry expression. Why are you going to sleep now? Saliva ran down my mouth and I felt incredibly sick. That jerk, did he hit me to wake me up? Wait a minute, hit? I gained sudden enlightenment. Yes, this was it. I hated it, but it couldn't be helped. I spoke to Yu Jong-hyuk. Hey, hit me one more time. A really strong one. What? They were misleading words. Then I had to say it again. No, kill me now. Chapter 138. Unreadable. Part 2. Everyone had a few words that influenced them. Lee Hyun-sung had something like this. For example, when Lee Hyun-sung was an undergraduate, these were the words he heard the most from his teacher. Everyone, be creative. Think about what other people can't. You must be able to break out of this place. At the time, Lee Hyun-sung had thought, so how do I do that? The demands of society were sudden for Lee Hyun-sung, who had been used to going to school, eating meals, and then going to sleep since childhood. So far, he had been told how to move and now he was forced to do something he had never done before. What was creativity? What was thinking about an idea that other people couldn't think of? Why did it suddenly become a world where he had to do something like this? Then what had he been doing so far? Li Hyunsung wandered all throughout university and then he naturally joined the army. I think you have a natural constitution to be a soldier. Please apply to be a senior officer. If he hadn't heard the administrator's words at that time, what would his life be like now? It was impossible to know. There was nothing he knew about the future he hadn't chosen. In any case, he was a soldier and he lived without regretting his choice. For a person who found society difficult, the army was relatively comfortable. The administrator congratulated Li Hyunsung for passing the senior officer's test and said, "Ensign Li. If you're not sure, then just follow what the manual says. Then at least people won't hold you responsible." He heard these words instead of the toast. The memory was as clear as the lunch he ate a week ago. However, if he could meet the administrator again, then he would ask one thing. "Administrator, what should I do now?" Li Hyunsung looked at the incoming sea of hell flames and bit his lips. I have no manual for cases like this. He thought it would be easier for him to call out the military creed as Li Hyunsung shouted, "Yonghiwan SSI. Please regain your mind. Please." Just as the service creed couldn't move the hearts of the soldiers, his voice didn't reach Yonghiwan. Warwick. He narrowly hid behind a building as the hell flames covered the ground and the incarnations burned painfully. Quackhack. Help me. Li Hyunsung couldn't save any of them. He looked at the deaths happening in front of his eyes and once again realized that the justice sleeping inside him was just a manual. Yonghiwan's figure was approaching through the hazy heat. "The constellation Master of Steel is looking at you." Li Hyunsung received that silent gaze and bit his lips. "Dr. SSI. What should I do? Should he fight? Could he stop her?" Li Hyunsung looked at the incoming Yonghiwan and his fist shook. Li Hyunsung had no idea what this shaking meant, why he hesitated and why he couldn't run away from this place. Maybe it wasn't the world that was hard. The difficult thing was Li Hyunsung himself. "Dr. SSI, please let me know the answer." Despite knowing it wasn't possible, Li Hyunsung prayed like a reservist, desperately hoping the training would be cancelled due to the weather. Then amazingly, he heard the voice he had been waiting for. "Li Hyunsung SSI." He thought it was a joke. "Can you hear me?" However, it wasn't a joke. He looked around but there was no source for the voice. In other words, the voice was heard in his head. "Dr. SSI. Was this the enemy's trap?" Still, he was willing to believe it even if it was the enemy's trick. Let's start thinking while running away. There are two ways. Li Hyunsung instinctively rose and ran. It wasn't a trap. There was only one person who would speak like this. Yonghiwan was chasing behind him, but he wasn't afraid anymore. His breathing stabilized and he was ready to accept new commands. His muscles started to tense as his breathing became heavy. -1 method is to kill Yonghiwan. It is a familiar choice. Kim Dokja had always been this way. It had been like this since the first time they met. He always released the safest and most brutal solution first. The party members themselves rejected it. The second method is to keep running away like this? That's right. Then we will do it the third way. Kim Dokja's solution was always the third answer. He was a person who always thought of the third situation. That was who Kim Dokja was. Thus, Li Hyunsung believed in him. However, Li Hyunsung SSI. This time, there was no third method. Of course, I had a third method. I just had to wait for the right time. Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint Stage 3 is activated. First-person supporting role Viewpoint is currently incomplete. Yonghiwan was using Hellflame's ignition. It was terrible even if the opponent was bad. Well, who would be different? Why are you always like this? Li Hyunsung cried out while breathing harshly. The first-person viewpoint meant I could feel the heat of the hell flames. Yonghiwan swung her sword like she intended to turn all of Seoul into a sea of fire. In fact, strictly speaking, the first and second methods I presented would have the same results. Li Hyunsung had to either kill Young Hee-won or flee. If he left, Young Hee-won would run out of magic power and die. In other words, one of them would die. This was the damn Nirvana scenario. Kill Hee-won SSI? You came to give me that advice? Young Hee-won was approaching. It was different when they were allies, but now I knew for sure after she became an enemy. The judge of destruction, Young Hee-won, was strong. Even if she didn't use judgment time, she was the owner of demon slaying. In addition, there was Uriel's stigma Hell Flames Ignition. She was one of the strongest members of my party. It was almost impossible to suppress the berserk Young Hee-won without killing him. I can't accept this method. What the hell was this courage? Li Hyunsung started running towards Young Hee-won. Wait a minute, Li Hyunsung SSI. Young Hee-won SSI. Wake up. Li Hyunsung kept running towards Young Hee-won. He rushed as if he was angry for believing in me, the country, and the manual. Li Hyunsung's Great Mountain Push and Young Hee-won's Hell Flames Ignition clashed. However, the palms that could push a mountain found it hard to break through the Archangel's flames. His right arm soon started to melt from the pure white light. Young Hee-won SSI. Li Hyunsung let out a pained and depressed cry. Li Hyunsung lost his right arm and reached out with his left arm. I cried out urgently. Li Hyunsung SSI, if you run away, then at least one of you can live. I don't want to. Nobody will blame you if you run away. I don't want to. Don't you think of me as a manual? Then please listen to me. I don't believe in such a manual. Li Hyunsung's answer was unexpected. At the same time, it was Li Hyunsung's answer. Everyone was contradictory. The person who followed the manual actually hated the manual more than anyone else. He was a creative person who were more subordinate to the system than anyone else. It was when he broke through this contradiction that his story would begin. I can't give up, even if the results aren't good. It doesn't matter if I die here. More matter how durable Li Hyunsung was. It was unreasonable for him to resist Hell Flame's ignition that melted even Shin Yu-sung. His left arm and then his right leg started to melt. Nevertheless, Li Hyunsung resisted. Like a moth towards the flames, he tried to reach Young Hee-won. He staggered as his right knee disappeared, and I told him. I see. You did well. Li Hyunsung didn't answer. I smiled bitterly. This is the third method. The third method wasn't something I could tell him. It was up to Li Hyunsung to decide for himself. I wasn't even convinced that it would work. Even so, I chose this path because I found the sad feelings that occurred in Li Hyunsung's mind the moment he saw Young Hee-won. You found the path yourself, without the manual. Li Hyunsung laughed as he collapsed in the flames. Dr. SSI, thank you. I could feel the ecstasy that occurred in Li Hyunsung's body. It was an emotion that humans reached when they broke through the contradiction and received an answer from death. Perhaps the sensation was the reality that Nirvana wanted to reach. It would have been wonderful if Nirvana could see this. Young Hee-won was the one infected, but it was Li Hyunsung who lived in the present more than anyone else. Thank you. It is starting now. This was the beginning of the story. It was up to the audience to determine the continuation of this story. There was one being watching Li Hyunsung with more delicate eyes than anyone else. Master of Steel. One of the most steadfast beings in the star stream. I spoke slowly. When are you going to act? The constellation Master of Steel is listening to your words. The constellation Master of Steel. The master of Orichalcum, the hardest planet in the universe and the sponsor of Steel Sword Li Hyunsung. I cut to the chase. Give your incarnation a chance. The constellation Master of Steel is silent. I know your fears. You must be afraid of the probability. The constellation Master of Steel has closed his eyes. But when are you going to notice the nebulae around you? Are you going to be daydreaming until the end of the scenario? Li Hyunsung had done enough. Now it was up to his sponsor. The constellation Master of Steel acknowledges the courage of the incarnation, Li Hyunsung. The constellation Master of Steel says it isn't time yet. I had expected it. In fact, Li Hyunsung was still too weak for the awakening. The constellation Master of Steel thinks that the incarnation, Li Hyunsung, won't be able to handle his narrative. The narrative of steel was hard and heavy. Li Hyunsung wouldn't be able to withstand it. Of course, if he was alone. I'll bear it with him. The constellation Master of Steel is looking at you. The Master of Steel seemed to be thinking of something. A moment later, a message was heard. The constellation Maritime War God has nodded. Then sparks filled the vicinity. The character, Li Hyunsung, is preparing for his attribute evolution. A narrative is required in order to evolve the attribute. The constellation Master of Steel is putting the narrative to the test. The narrative proof of steel has begun. A torrent of silver light rose from Li Hyunsung's body. I looked at the brilliant light and was reminded of a scene from Ways of Survival. Who was it? A character asked Yu Jonghyuk a question. Why is Li Hyunsung called the Steel Sword? A Juicy doesn't use a sword. Li Hyunsung never used a sword at all in the original Ways of Survival. Even so, Li Hyunsung's nickname was Steel Sword. Li Hyunsung doesn't need a sword. Steel started to grow from the melted arms and leg of Li Hyunsung. Like scales, the steel grew to cover his whole body. Li Hyunsung's body changed into one big sword. The character, Li Hyunsung, has activated the Stigma Steel transformation. A single sword that wouldn't break before any trial. If Yu Jonghyuk was here, then he would have said it clearly. That guy, he is the sword. Chapter 139. Unreadable. Part 3. The new layer of skin was made of steel. Li Hyunsung's body was being reshaped, as if he was another species. Steel transformation. Only the first stage armor was activated, but this alone wasn't the usual power. Li Hyunsung, who mastered stage 1, was harder than Gong Pildu's armed fortress and wouldn't die even after being hit by Yu Jonghyuk's heaven-shaking sword. Li, live. The problem was that stage 1 wasn't fully activated yet. This is the real stigma that Li Hyunsung SSI needs to learn. Li Hyunsung realized the situation and quickly retreated. The steel transformation isn't yet complete. The stigma can only be used by those who have achieved a story. All sponsors gave a stigma to their incarnations. There were stigmas in the form of gifts, and some that could only be used under difficult conditions. Steel transformation of the Master of Steel was one of the difficult stigmas. The story Proof of Steel has begun. It was because this stigma required the indirect proof of what the constellation had experienced. Plus. Proof of Steel. 1. True steel is born in tens of thousands of quenches. Plus. It was an unkind sentence thrown into the scenario. Li Hyunsung seemed confused. What does this mean? The basis of quenching is cooling after a high heat treatment. Don't tell me. It seems right. Please keep your mind straight. In a sense, it might be fortunate that Young Hee-won was Li Hyunsung's opponent. Li Hyunsung turned pale. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband is interested in the story of this world. The constellation Defense Master wonders how his strength compares. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire has both hands clasped together in a nervous manner. The blazing hellfire turned blue along with the messages of the constellations. Maybe Young Hee-won's hell flames ignition had increased a level because the flames became deeper and fiercer. The asphalt mixed with impurities melted from the pure white flames, and the high heat turned them into a deadly weapon. The silver armor instantly started to melt, and the scattered foreign materials penetrated the armor like bullets, damaging Li Hyunsung's insides. New steel grew from the melted areas, but it wasn't without damage. Kook. Blood emerged from Li Hyunsung's mouth. He would have been able to resist hell flame's ignition if his steel transformation was perfect, but it wasn't yet. In any case, hell flame's ignition was the highest level stigma belonging to the fire property. It was amazing that he didn't just collapse. Lee Hyunsung took one step back and screamed. I was pained to see this scene, but it wasn't yet time. Lee Hyunsung's steel was burning red. A bit more, a bit more. The temperature has exceeded the standard value. That's it. The quenching has begun. The base of steel was quenching. The heart of this story was to burn in a high temperature above the standard until the body became made of perfect steel. Hold on. You can do it. Fortunately, Lee Hyunsung wasn't evil. Hell Flame's ignition was a stigma with the fire and divine properties. If Lee Hyunsung was evil, then he would have already been turned into a pile of ashes from Hell Flame's ignition. As Lee Hyunsung was enduring, I quickly looked at the information of Young Hee-won. The character Young Hee-won is currently suffering from thought infection. The character Young Hee-won is in a lost state. The trauma of the character Young Hee-won is completely open. That bastard, he completely made a mess of a human's mind. I can't forgive him. Nirvana's thought infection pulled all the dark parts of a person's mind to the surface in order to settle their time in the present. I should kill them. Humans who face the reality of a cliff where the future had disappeared usually lose hope. This was especially true when the reality was terrible. In the process, someone would feel despair and collapse, while someone else would turn into a beast and release relentless desires. Some resisted angrily and lose their sense of reason. Once this resignation was repeated, they would find a savior to comfort themselves. They would martyr themselves for this savior, sacrificing their humble lives before the great present. Kill all the men. I seemed to know what her trauma was. Young Hee-won's initial attribute of crouching was based on a strong psychological shock. Looking back on the first moment I found her, it wasn't unusual for her to have a strong hostility towards men. Is this Hee-won SSI's heart? Lee Hyunsung asked from amidst the blazing flames. Can you hear her? That, a bit. I never thought that Lee Hyunsung would be able to hear the messages of Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Was it because I was immersed in the first-person viewpoint? Did Lee Hyunsung feel my emotions as much as I understood Lee Hyunsung? Lee Hyunsung spoke like he had forgotten the heat. This is Dr. SSI's ability? Yes. It is my skill. I had to confess, because there was nothing good about lying here. I apologize for hiding it until now. However, Lee Hyunsung didn't seem upset. I'm a bit embarrassed. My heart. The second wave came before he could finish. The intense heat melted the incarnations in the surroundings, and the area was filled with lava. The entire ground melted from the powerful heat. The building sank with the ground. Now I had to make a decision. You should head in the direction of suppression. Won't I hurt Hee-won SSI? Lee Hyunsung was at the disadvantage, but he was worrying about the other person. Still, Lee Hyunsung's words weren't wrong. Her heart is hurt. The most obvious solution was to kill Nirvana or resolve Young Hee-won's trauma. The former was impossible now, and the latter. I wouldn't have been so worried if Young Hee-won was a character with a big role in the original novel. Young Hee-won was a newly discovered person, and I didn't know her well. The only thing I could do was take care of the symptoms, not the cause. Dr. SSI. Let's try it. We nodded as one body. The distance from Young Hee-won was get far, because he had stepped back a bit. I had to be close to her to try this method. The skin of steel grew to cover Lee Hyunsung's face. The muscles all over Lee Hyunsung's body were twitching. He was like a silver knight as the steel properly covered his body. The silver knight started to run through the flames. In accordance with this, the wall of flames became higher. It was a warning not to come closer. He wasn't allowed here. Yuwu. Lee Hyunsung acted like it was training and ran straight through the flames. He was burned again and again. Steel pieces melted and fell to the ground. His eyes were becoming blurred from the heat. Hee-won SSI. We will save you. It was one step. We are. Once again, another step. Hee-won SSI. I watched Lee Hyun-sung and had a thought. I had forgotten for a while, because I could hear the hearts of other people. Originally, reaching a person's heart was a difficult and painful thing. Lee Hyun-sung and I clearly saw the world from the same eyes, but we didn't see the same thing. Lee Hyun-sung's heart bursting with emotions was proof of this. It was a strange feeling. Originally, it wasn't supposed to be like this. The story changed thanks to me. Cool. Lee Hyun-sung's knees collapsed when there were 10 steps left. The character, Lee Hyun-sung, has reached the limits of his mental state. I was awakened by my shaking vision. Even if the story changed, this was still ways of survival. The constellation Master of Steel is looking at his incarnation with sad eyes. All characters struggled in utter despair. This was ways of survival. Hyun-sung SSI. Still, I was sometimes curious when reading Ways of Survival. Had the author of Ways of Survival regretted the ending that he created? Leave it to me for a moment. The exclusive skill, Fourth Wall, is shaking. The first-person supporting role Viewpoint is extremely active. Lee Hyun-sung's consciousness was shaken and my consciousness entered. Control of his body was transferred and the senses of the entire body were strongly activated. Lee Hyun-sung was suffering from this pain. It was enough to make him crazy. The whole body burned in the flames and the melted bone joints and tendons made it feel like my limbs were cut off. I used Lee Hyun-sung's voice and shouted at Young Hee-won. Young Hee-won SSI. You will die if this continues. There was no response from Young Hee-won. She just kept emitting the hellish flames. Lee Hyun-sung will die. Do you want to kill Lee Hyun-sung SSI? I raised Lee Hyun-sung's legs with all my strength and moved forward a bit. 1 step, 2 steps, and... Shit, it was too hot. I heard a voice as my knees bent from the pain. Doc SSI. I'll do it. It was Lee Hyun-sung's voice. I must do it. The will of steel has responded. I nodded. After all, I was a reader. I must not forget my duty. My consciousness left and Lee Hyun-sung regained his body again. Lee Hyun-sung's body was regaining a perfect steel shape. Hyun SSI. The blazing hellfire made her face blue. This fire would eventually gnaw at her. Her tears dried as soon as they fell down. Lee Hyun-sung acted unexpectedly towards her. Excuse me for a moment. Lee Hyun-sung took the last step and embraced Young Hee-won. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire is embarrassed by the unexpected love between comrades. Young Hee-won's small body entered Lee Hyun-sung's wide arms. It was so wide that he could touch his fingertips together without touching her. Rather than avoiding it, Young Hee-won made her flames stronger. It was like the flames were all she could do with her emotions. There was a rattling sound and walls of steel started to be created around Lee Hyun-sung's arms. It was a wall that would free one person from the world. In order to remove flames, the oxygen must be shut off. Lee Hyun-sung knew this and sacrificed himself to become the wall for her. He would bear her wrath on behalf of the world. All I could do was watch the two of them. I hoped that Lee Hyun-sung could reach the heart of Young Hee-won, who couldn't speak. How much time passed? The story Proof of Steel has been completed. Finally, Young Hee-won's flames died down. It was a familiar female voice that woke Lee Hyun-sung up. I'm choking. He looked down and saw Young Hee-won's face. He looked around and it was an unimaginable sight. The steel that grew out from his body covered Young Hee-won while blocking the surrounding area. I am really sorry. I will release you now. Maybe it was because the melted steel wall had hardened, but the steel wall wasn't easily released. As Lee Hyun-sung was feeling confused, Young Hee-won's forehead touched Lee Hyun-sung's chest. Thank you. Lee Hyun-sung shook his head at the soft touch to the steel. No. It was a very small gesture, but it was enough. His heart had clearly been delivered. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire hates this comradeship. By the way, Hyun-sung SSI, who else was here? Huh? That. Young Hee-won looked grumpy at Lee Hyun-sung's confusion. It's okay. It isn't important. Rather, release this quickly. There is no time. Huh? Did something happen? Young Hee-won glanced at Lee Hyun-sung but shouted in a loud voice towards the sky. Kim Dokja SSI, are you listening right now? Usanga SSI is in danger. Chapter 140. Unreadable. Part 4. Your body has woken up due to a powerful shock. Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint Stage 3 has been turned off. My senses gradually returned as my consciousness settled into my flesh. By the way, something was strange. Why didn't I see the resurrection message? You can't be rewarded for Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint Stage 3 because of the unstable connection of first-person supporting role Viewpoint. As I was feeling surprised by this unexpected message, I slowly felt the pain and weight of my flesh. There was something wrong. I saw Yoo Jong-hyuk, who was staring at me. Shit, I was almost surprised to death. Kim Dokja, are you dead? I thought I knew a bit about what was going on. I knew why the resurrection message didn't come up and why there wasn't compensation for Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint Stage 3. I never died in the first place. Kim Dokja. I was just hit really hard. Damn bastard, why didn't he kill me? This jerk, not killing me when I wanted to be killed. Should I have just killed him in the beginning? I heard an unexpected thought and shut my mouth. Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint had automatically activated. Yoo Jong-hyuk's thoughts poured in like a waterfall. Everything is twisted because of this person. It is different from what I know in the earlier regressions. The amount of information available is too limited. I can't save the world like this. What was this? The reason I was hurt by the Salvation Church was because I spent too much time in the last round. It was a mistake to train for 100 years then. My mind was permanently damaged. Maybe it was a mistake not to get the absolute throne. I will start from the beginning again. Damn it, the reggressor's depression had begun. Was it due to the mental attack? I cried out in fear of what he would decide. I'm hurt, you jerk. Yoo Jong-hyuk looked over at my provocation and spoke in a subdued voice. You are the one who wanted me to kill you. Is the matter resolved? Roughly. The urgent fire has been put out. Yoo Jong-hyuk's expression didn't look bright, so I touched my pained stomach and told him some of what I learned. I told him about how Lee Hyun-sung saved Young Hee-won. Of course, I didn't mention that I watched from the Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. I usually would have added on a lame story, but the half-hearted Yoo Jong-hyuk nodded with a gloomy expression. That is what happened. Then what are you going to do now? I haven't decided yet, but the situation is very optimistic. The woman called Usanga is important to you, so you must be desperate to find her first. Was she caught by the Salvation Leader? Maybe. In any case, I am hopeful about the situation. What is so hopeful about it? Jong-hyuk, we can save the world. Don't you know? Yoo Jong-hyuk stared at me. What are you talking about? I thought I was being too obvious, so I added an excuse. Well, it is like this. If my guess is correct, Nirvana wouldn't have touched Usanga. If he is the Nirvana I know. Do you know the reincarnator? Yoo Jong-hyuk's eyes narrowed. Min Jae-won, who hadn't wanted to disturb us, finally interrupted. She had a startled expression on her face as she said, the two of you are quite familiar with each other. I'm a friendly person. By the way, are you okay? Thanks to you. I almost joined the Salvation Church. Min Jae-won trembled because the encounter with Nirvana left a deep trauma. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to consider her situation. King of Beauty, I think I need some help. I started to collect the scattered people using the King of Beauty's Warang. The urgent task was to prevent further damage from Nirvan's thought infection. In particular, it would be disastrous if Lee Jae-hai was infected with strange ideas. Then the ghost fleet on Han River would turn Seoul into a wreckage. Fortunately, Lee Gilyung and Shin Yu-sung were in close proximity with each other, and it wasn't difficult to find Gong Pildu, who had occupied a building. He complained, "I wanted to stay in that land." Peace land? Damn it. Gong Pildu seemed sorry that the previous scenario was over. Well, Gong Pildu was a king there. Han Suyang used to be a goddess, so I wondered how she felt now. Honorable Supreme King. Please accept me. I respect you. The flattering words that were difficult to hear came from the new incarnations who entered the scenario. The rumor that we returned from Peace Land had spread. I looked to the side and saw the frowning Yu Jong-hyuk. Those people can't save the world, even with 100 trucks. Once again, the answer is regression. Now, our Supreme King isn't in a good mood right now, so back off. Do you want to die? I personally stepped forward to get rid of any causes of depression. The new incarnations glared at me like fans kicked out by a celebrity's manager. Who is this bastard? He is the ugliest king. These scum. I was going to say something when unexpectedly, Yu Jong-hyuk opened his mouth. If you want to join me, become a person who can help me. Unlike usual, there was a strong melancholy in his cold voice. They were insulting words, but fans truly were different. Shit, so cool, that excellent young and dark voice. The incarnations, both male and female, looked entranced. So chic. I will become stronger. I will definitely be helpful. Why was the world so unfair? By the way, why were they looking for Yu Jong-hyuk? Had they all forgotten that I was the one who overpowered the Salvation Leader? At this moment, someone opened his mouth. Hey, based on what I saw earlier, the ugly king is more powerful. Eh? Is this real? I didn't know if it was real, but I was pretty strong. Are your eyes in the back of your head? The Supreme King overpowered him with one hit. Is that right? My shaking hands became heavier, and I noticed that Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gilyung had grabbed onto my hands. I think a juicy is handsome. Hyung, the face isn't everything. The only one on my side were the kids, no, Shin Yu-sung. By the way, what was with the ugly king? It seemed to be positioned as my nickname. I honestly didn't understand. I had never heard the word ugly used towards me until the fall of the world. Yu Jong-hyuk was depressed, but I was the one who had to suffer. The ugliest king? Puhaha. It fits really well. I turned my head at the laugh and saw Lee Jae-hai. Almost all my party members were gathered except for Young Hee-won and Lee Hyun-sung, who were relatively far away. Then what should I do now? I had a headache. At this moment, a loud sound appeared from somewhere and Yu Jong-hyuk responded first. A large monster species. It is 6th grade. Is there a scenario in progress here? Lee Jae-hai was right. The 7th scenario, monster hunting, was an event scenario for incarnations who didn't participate in Peace Land and the new incarnations. 6th grade monsters were already showing up in the 7th scenario? It was Min Jae-won who answered the questions I had. I'm sorry, but the 7th scenario is already over. It isn't in progress right now? You arrived around the time the rewards were given. The situation is already finished. The Salvation Leader received the highest reward. As expected from the Salvation Leader. Speaking of which, the Salvation Church seemed to have hunted monsters when I first met the leader. Then where are these monsters coming from? Be prepared. It isn't just one or two. Yu Jong-hyuk raised the heaven-shaking sword while the other party members also brought out their weapons. The 6th grade heavy hound appeared and broke in buildings with huge paws. At first glance, there were over 10 of them. The 6th grade monsters shouldn't move around in groups like this. What is with these bastards? We swung our weapons at the monsters. Lee Jae-hai used demon slaying while Gong Pildu used armed fortress. In addition, there was Yu Jong-hyuk's breaking the sky sword and Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gilyung's diverse communication. Certainly, our party members were strong. We cleared 10 6th grade monsters in an instant, but the situation wasn't resolved. Gong Pilda shouted, "They're coming again. Everyone, come this way." I had to reduce the damage, so I evacuated the new incarnations, and cut off the head of the heavy hound with the blade of faith. Of course, I didn't forget to collect the cores of the fallen monsters. The constellation Secretive Plotter is wondering about your reasoning. However, there was something uncomfortable. This development didn't appear in the original third regression of the novel. It didn't appear in the fourth, fifth, or even the 10th regression. It felt like I was missing something important. Think. Kim Dokja. When did this scenario happen? Due to the effect of your exclusive attribute, the memories from the books you have read will increase. Perhaps? I wish to inform all incarnations of Soldong. Then the message of the Dakibi came. It wasn't Baihyung, but a voice I was hearing for the first time. Aren't you surprised by the monster suddenly appearing? Sigh, as you might have expected, the next scenario has started. We also wanted to give you a break, it is regrettable. This scenario wasn't created by the Dakibi, but is an automatic scenario. A new main scenario has arrived. Main scenario number 8, The Strongest Sacrifice, has begun. It was a different name from the 8th scenario I knew. I opened the contents of the scenario. Plus. Main scenario number 8, The Strongest Sacrifice, category, main. Difficulty, S. Clear conditions, survive the wave of monsters. This scenario requires caution because the rank of the monsters rises every 4 hours. Time limit. Compensation? Failure, death. Asterisk, there are additional clear conditions. Asterisk, hints are provided once every 4 hours. Plus. For your information. It starts from the 6th grade. In 4 hours, the 5th grade species will emerge, and then 4 hours after that, it will be 4th grade. Then 4 hours later, well. Don't you know? Then one of the incarnations shouted, "What? What is an automatic scenario? Eh? There isn't a time limit? A time limit? Haha. There is no such thing." I knew the words were true. Nirvana appeared, and Yu Jonghyuk's party was much stronger than the original third regression. I vaguely guessed what was going on. This development had appeared in ways of survival. It is because all of you are too strong. Oh my god, the Korean incarnations have become so strong that they don't fit the balance anymore. Aren't you being a bit too greedy? This is a scenario that automatically occurs when the incarnations of certain domes become too strong. The soul incarnations were at a loss. As mentioned, there are 2 solutions to this scenario. Additional conditions appeared in the air. Plus. Additional clear conditions, pick one. 1. The death of half the incarnations in Soul Dome. Asterisk, current number of incarnations, 107,624. Plus. The Dakibi spoke with admiration. There are still so many people? It is good that it is an even number. Shit. Don't talk nonsense. You are telling us to just die? Dakibi scum. The Dakibi smiled and added. Please calm down. There is a second condition. Plus. Additional clear conditions, pick one. 1. The death of the strongest incarnation in Soul Dome. Plus. I understood. The name of this scenario was the ultimate sacrifice. In other words, even if half of Soul didn't die, the scenario would end with the death of the strongest incarnation. The incarnation shouted excitedly, "The strongest incarnation? What? Who is that referring to? Tell us who it is." Haha, I can't tell you that. Is it any fun if I tell you? Well, he is the strongest, so he would know the best. The Dakibi said. Then work hard to find them. Or do you already know? Perhaps the strongest incarnation is the Apostle of Justice who will sacrifice themselves for you. I'm a bit bored, so let me give you a hint. I wish you the blessing of the story. Plus. Hint 1. The 10th strongest incarnation in Seoul Dome is Maritime Admiral Lee Ji-hai. Plus. Wow, what? Nonsense. I am only 10th? Lee Ji-hai grumbled. However, no one was able to laugh at her. Everyone was busy watching one person. He was the person I was eavesdropping on right now. Everything is too twisted. A scenario I don't know about has appeared. Ah, please. Yu Jong-hyuk. I can't think of a way to fix it. Maybe I should regress. Damn, what would happen to me if he regressed? I absolutely refused to be swept up in his death without knowing anything. I glared at Yu Jong-hyuk in front of me and formed a fist.